Have you ever wondered why Skyrim, a game about slaying dragons with your fists and sending Lydia into the stratosphere with your voice, about exploration and grand fantasy storylines and being a stealth archer and becoming archmage and stealing sweet rolls and doing all of this until you take an untimely arrow in the knee? Have you ever wondered why this game starts with a slow, quiet cart ride?
Hey, you're finally awake. You were trying to cross the border.
And everybody knows these words. The scene is one of the most famous in all of gaming introductions, if not the most famous ever made. But as famous as it is, it's also deeply misunderstood. And as I played this intro again and again, trying to figure out why, I came to realize that everything you see and everything you hear is carefully laid out to introduce you to the world of Skyrim before you have a chance to be set free.
Every line of dialogue, every silence, every bump in the road is doing something. Because before Skyrim teaches you how to fight, it teaches you what's worth fighting for.
But the developers were doing this intentionally. They knew that if your time in the cart was super impactful, if they could use this to introduce you to the world of Skyrim, then you'd know that the world of Skyrim was worth being introduced to.
There aren't really any cutscenes in Skyrim, but this cart ride is the closest we get. And it's important because there's meaning behind everything. There's a reason that we start in silence, a reason a petty thief from Rorikstead is seated across from the regicidal king. There's a reason you don't see bees in the opening moments. There's even a reason the cart goes downhill instead of up. But above all, there's a reason we start Skyrim in a janky wooden cart. And today, you'll learn why. 26.7 seconds before hearing those iconic first words, you sit staring at a blank monitor. And then Bethesda claims its ownership of the game before slowly opening your eyes, crescendoing the music, and revealing the world of Skyrim in tandem with the game's eponymous name. And so you sit there, you're kind of jostled and confused, and you start to take in this cold, foggy world as this ragtag group of characters, all positioned in a cart that is cramped, bumpy, and certainly not OSHA approved, starts rolling down the hill. And they give you a few seconds to settle in, to meet this world. And then Ralof turns and delivers one of gaming's greatest lines.
Hey, you're finally awake.
And with that, we're off. Ralof leans in and starts talking. Lokir of Rorikstead cuts him off. The guard up front snaps at us to shut up. Ulfric does a really good job at listening to that guard, and we slowly roll into the quaint village of Helgen, while Ralof and Lokir bicker in the background, slowly introducing us to the core conflict at the heart of Skyrim. And things start light, but they get more and more grim. It becomes quickly clear that we are being carted to our deaths. We're going to be killed in just a few minutes, which is a bummer because I just paid $60 for what I was really hoping would be at least an hour of gameplay. We continue into town. A father warns his child to get inside. The cart churns to a halt and we're forced out. And all this takes place over the course of 3 minutes. And though you could claim the intro lasts until you have that Bethesdian calling card of stepping out of dark area into bright area, to me that mini dungeon is a bit more of a gameplay mechanics introduction.
And I love that section. It's also great. It's also something I cherish, but in my opinion, it's just way less masterful than that first 3-minute cart ride that introduces you to the entirety of Skyrim's world in just a few minutes.
And this often gets criticized for being a lore dump or having too much dialogue, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, and we need to unpack that. So let's go back to the start. I think the craziest thing about Skyrim's introduction is how it leads with audio instead of visuals. I mean, yeah, Skyrim is a game with an incredible amount of iconic sound effects and beautiful music pieces and iconic vocal performances, but it does seem odd that they would begin with just sound while they had this beautiful, expansive world to show off. And they hide their visuals even before you hit play. I mean, the main menu is basically just a logo and a list of options with chanting in the background, and when you finally do hit new game, you're given a loading screen that is just a tiny taste of what Skyrim has to visually offer. But then the sounds start pouring in. You start to hear the rattling of seasoned wood, the steady rhythm of breathing, the clomping of hooves, and layered over it all is the grind of wheels against their axles and this syncopated rhythm from the cobbled road beneath you. And then finally, the sound of a horse. But as unorthodox as this is, I actually really love this. You know that Skyrim is going to be this slow, methodical thing just from the start, the way that they make you sit in silence, the way that they trust you to give them attention. But with the cart and with the breathing, there's also a hint of French horn. Now, Jeremy Soule is my 7th most listened to artist on Spotify of all time, and I've streamed his songs 1,239 times in my lifetime, which is not including the insane amount of time I spend listening to Elder Scrolls music and ambience, Autumn, and Skyrim stunning scenes in 4K on YouTube, which might double or triple that number. But safe to say, I have a lot to say about the music of Skyrim, and I'm going to be holding back in this video. But I will say that Awake, the song that plays here, is one of the game's most unique tracks, and that its usage is preordained and scripted to follow the exact beats of what the game knows will happen in the intro sequence. It's the only time in the game that things are so on wheels, so they want to make sure that they nail it. And so they're able to use a term that I was shocked to find out in my film classes in college is literally called Mickey Mousing. It's basically when a soundtrack is written and performed to perfectly align with the visual on screen. Now, in Mickey Mouse and in other films and media, it's quite in your face and on the nose, whereas here in Skyrim, it's much more subtle, but it's worth pointing out because the rest of Skyrim is accompanied by random music beats. There's music you hear in the overworld, in dungeons, and combat, but it's all hard-coded to various triggers.
And Skyrim breaks this rule just once. It breaks it in this opening cinematic, which is not just rare for Skyrim, but it's actually pretty rare to find in any video games. You'll see it in some of the longer story-driven content, but in an RPG like this, it is very far from common.
And you hear this effect as the soundtrack swells once and then twice while we're still enshrouded in darkness, before descending as if to make room for the visual that slowly appears on screen. And you'll hear this song Awake just once, and to me, it's the glue that holds this whole introduction together. And it comes back to crescendo just as the game name is finally revealed. Skyrim, right, that's what this video is about. In 1957, Sidney Lumet released a quietly revolutionary film called 12 Angry Men. In the movie, 12 jurors, confined to a single room, gradually reveal their worldviews through nothing but conversation. There's no action, there's no visual spectacle, it's just dialogue. But through tone and silence and increasing friction over the course of the movie, the world beyond that room begins to take shape. It's not one that we ever get to see directly, but one that's reflected in the characters themselves.
I actually had to watch this movie for part of my film degree in college, and I know that it's a work of art, but I really didn't like it. And I think it's because it was assigned as homework, so it felt like homework. But looking back, I'm actually really glad that I watched it because I saw a lot of similarities between Sidney Lumet's 12 Angry Men and the 4 people sitting in Skyrim's cart in the introduction of Skyrim.
I mean, of course, Ralof, Lokir, Ulfric, and the cart driver, they don't give intricate speeches like you'd see in the movie. They bicker, they glare, they sit silently. But in just a few lines and through the careful direction of voice acting, framing, and silence, they tell you everything you need to know about Skyrim's world. The most iconic character in the introduction is definitely Ralof. He's the first to break the ice.
Hey, you're finally awake.
Ralof serves as the poster child for the Nords of Skyrim, the people at the heart of the game. He's gruff, he speaks with a Nordic twang. He's quick to try to form a rapport with you as a player, acting like you're on his side before you even get a chance to decide for yourself. And he wears this cape, which ties him to the Stormcloak Rebellion. Despite not knowing him, and despite not being loyal to his cause, he starts to position us as allies who inadvertently got caught in the same ambush. And Ralof embodies the Nord everyman. We're gonna wander into his hometown of Riverwood soon, which is a quaint fishing and logging village on the outskirts of the greater Whiterun area. In Riverwood, we'll meet his sister, Gerdur, who's gonna be eager to help and share Ralof's rebellious spirit. He comes from humble beginnings. You can tell that he's a family man. And he trusts you implicitly. He sees you as a brother in arms even though you've just met. So why is this man from the quaint village of Riverwood so passionate about fighting the Empire? Why would he give up this simple, happy life? Well, this is a question that Skyrim is posing without saying it explicitly. Ralof doesn't expect to win. He expects to die, but he'd rather die defiant than live under the Empire's rule, and that subtly tells us everything we need to know.
You were trying to cross the border, right? Walked right into that Imperial ambush, same as us. And that thief over there.
That thief over there is named Lokir. Lokir is a Nord as well, and he's quick to play devil's advocate in the cart. He throws a punch right back at Ralof.
Damn you Stormcloaks. Skyrim was fine until you came along. Empire was nice and lazy.
And Lokir is also a Nord, but he wants nothing to do with the war. Just like with every revolution, not everyone is on the side of the rebellion, and not everyone feels the need for change. In this way, Skyrim mirrors life. Not everything is so black and white. Just like in real life, the political tension in Tamriel is layered. The Empire is overly repressive and compromised by the ultra-rich and corrupt Thalmor, and the Stormcloaks are so tied to keeping Skyrim pure that non-Nordic races face systematic discrimination. But Lokir, on the other hand, is just a petty thief who keeps to himself, which a lot of players identify with. He's unaligned, he doesn't really care about the broader conflict, but we'll soon see how that turns out for him.
You there. You and me, we shouldn't be here. It's these Stormcloaks the Empire wants.
And so Lokir tries to form a bond with us just like Ralof does. And it becomes clear that they both want us to side with them, to agree that they're right. Both Ralof and Lokir desperately need their worldviews to be validated. You can tell the world of Skyrim is torn in half by this conflict, and in times of desperation, in times so desperate that you're tied up in a cart, these two men just want someone, who is a neutral third party, to tell them that they're right, that they've chosen the right side. But on the other hand, there's no witty opening line from Ulfric. He looks regal, stoic, and his bound mouth makes him appear as a threat so dire that our captors wouldn't dare let him speak. He can't introduce himself, obviously, so Lokir steps in.
What's wrong with him, huh?
Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King.
Ulfric? The Jarl of Windhelm? You're the leader of the rebellion. But if they've captured you... Oh gods, where are they taking us?
Ulfric is clearly a big deal, and that is awful news for us. He's the rebellion incarnate. He's this powerful, silenced force that has the ability to disrupt systematic oppression from the opposition. And by placing us next to him on the cart, we're visually on his side, but there's still time for us as a player to decide if that's the right alignment for us. Of course, the main conflict of Skyrim is the dragon invasions. It's everyone against the dragons, which in many ways serves to unite a disparate populace against a common goal.
That's kind of a very like Marvel Avengers way of looking at it, right? It's like the game is cool because you get to fight dragons. That is super cool and honestly kind of badass, but that's not what makes the game special. The game is special because of the immersion. The game is special because of the world that feels so alive. And so while in a few minutes Alduin's going to show up, your execution's going to be interrupted, and you're going to get this massive masterclass in cinematic playable cutscenes, they first give you a moment to pull back and see why the atmosphere is so important, which is really the core of Skyrim.
It's clearly a world that Ralof and Ulfric are so keen to fight for, and even Lokir, who is trying to escape Hammerfell, feels tied to the land.
Rorikstead. I'm from Rorikstead.
But they don't spell this out for you. You're not given a breakdown of the legislative battle that led to the Imperial occupation of Skyrim. You're not lore-dumped about the White Gold Concordat or how the war-crippled Empire bent the knee to the Thalmor and outlawed the worship of Talos to avoid total annihilation. Instead, you just feel the tension in their voices. You hear the defiance in Ralof's tone, the bitterness in Lokir's cynicism, the weight of Ulfric's silence. And all of that subtle world building is underscored by the presence of a fourth person in the cart, who never speaks of ideology because he doesn't need to.
Shut up back there.
In the intro, we feel the power of the Imperial Legion contextually because we're their captives and we can see that they have a concrete process for trafficking and disposing of those who oppose their view. It is impossible to play through these first few minutes and not think that the Imperial Legion are the ruling power and that the Stormcloaks are the underdogs. But it's this anonymous driver, this faceless cog in the Empire's machine that hammers home that point. He's not really a villain, he's not even a person, he's a function. He moves bodies to their death. The final words of his prisoners aren't even human to him, they're just an annoyance, like a bug that he needs to swat away. Now, we've had our fair share of Skyrim killers since 2011. Avowed, Outward, Greedfall, the list goes on and on. But even if these games were good in their own right, they never held a candle to the magic of the Elder Scrolls world. Never Knows Best put it beautifully in a recent video when he said that Elder Scrolls games are unique due to their unparalleled freedom and their unparalleled immersion. It's because the world is fully open. Every direction feels like the right direction. The NPCs who fill the world feel alive. They have feelings, opinions, routines.
And to me, that's what makes Skyrim so special. It's not the dragons, it's not the massive, epic, high fantasy storyline. It's that they give you 4 people in a cart and they trust that that's enough to introduce you to the game's world.
The joy of Skyrim is felt in the freedom that they give you to immerse yourself in a world so dense and so cared for that it truly feels alive. And the depth of the world, the immersion that makes Skyrim special, it all starts in the cart. But on the topic of other games, Skyrim isn't even the only game to start with darkness. In Dark Souls, for example, you begin in this dimly lit prison cell. You're fully removed from the outside world. Because of this, it's mysterious. It lets your mind start to piece together the outside world before you're handed the reins. But actually, Dark Souls gives you this massive exposition dump cutscene before that, so even they weren't confident enough to make you sit in pure silence. But Breath of the Wild was. You actually sit in a very similar 16 seconds of pure silence before this ethereal voice prompts you to wake up, and then reveals Link in his mystical jacuzzi. But then you sit for 2 minutes and 3 seconds before they give you control of your character. And I love Breath of the Wild's opening. I think the way they tutorialize those key gameplay elements and that starting zone is genius, but to me, those 2 minutes of silence and slow pans are just a bit overkill. And I think it does a great job at indicating what a silent meditation the rest of the game is going to be, but that juxtaposition between the Zen jacuzzi into sprinting with your wet feet like a lifeguard is about to blow their whistle is just a bit too jarring for me. Dark Souls and Breath of the Wild, they both have introductions that are perfectly suited for the games that they preface. And Skyrim takes elements of these quiet, contemplative introductions, like the focus on ambient sound design and the leisurely pacing, and pairs it with some other tricks it has up its sleeve, like environmental storytelling and a rich tapestry of culture. But one of my favorite game introductions of all time comes from 2004's Half-Life 2. You start with 10 seconds of darkness before they quickly drop you into a hallucinatory monologue from G-Man. And you come to your senses on a train, which is not too different from a cart, where you see a few employees and this industrialized world starts to fill in around you. In a few seconds, you're given control, and then you quickly get this masterclass in diegetic environmental storytelling. Now, Todd Howard and Bethesda are kind of known for their openings. In Morrowind, you start with some light paperwork, Oblivion kicks off with Patrick Stewart monologuing, Fallout 3 makes you live an entire childhood in a vault, and then Fallout 4 makes you sip coffee in a 1950s fever dream before nukes come in to ruin your morning. All four of these openings are doing a lot. They're direct, they're cinematic, they're explanatory, but Skyrim is different. And there are a ton of other game introductions that I really love, like BioShock, The Last of Us, Alan Wake 2, Death Stranding. Actually, yeah, Death Stranding's opening is really, really good. I mean, it's no Aliens in the Attic, the hit 2009 game based on the hit 2009 film, but it's decent, it's passable. All that to say, there are tons of other incredible game intros that are worth being celebrated, but as good as all those intros are, none are as iconic as Skyrim. In that cart, Skyrim makes a promise to the player that the world is rich, that your time is respected, and that you're incredibly important, even when you're a nameless prisoner. It's a promise that the rest of the game delivers on, and it's for that reason that everybody that plays Skyrim can remember the first few minutes like the back of their hand. But there's actually a lot more happening in the cart that we haven't discussed at all so far. Remember earlier when I said there's a reason the cart is heading downhill instead of up? Well, both film and game directors love to use descent as a metaphor for loss of control, the approach of death, or even the beginning of transformation. And you've seen this before, like in Lord of the Rings when the Fellowship descends into Moria, they meet the Tomb of Balin, they summon hordes of goblins, they awaken the Balrog and lose Gandalf to the Abyss. It's a major turning point for the story, and it's the first real loss that the Fellowship experiences. And then you see this in Dark Souls, with Blighttown's long, spiraling descent into rot and into madness. The air starts to get thick, you start to get anxious, and the rules of this game that you've been playing for hours start to break down around you. Because you're used to playing Dark Souls the way it's meant to be played. You use spacing, you slowly learn enemy attack patterns, you play deliberately and the game rewards you for doing so. But Miyazaki flips this with Blighttown. Enemy placement gets unpredictable, you're poisoned constantly, and that level of verticality throws you into a state of constant disorientation. And people love to joke about Miyazaki's calling card of poison swamps and how they're always some of the most brutal parts of his games, but that all started with a descent. And so does Skyrim. Todd Howard uses that slow, winding descent to add to that ominous feeling that you get in the cart. It's not overly dramatic, it's not overly theatrical, but it's quiet, it's subtle, and because of that, it's effective. And within the cart, there's even more visual storytelling going on. Ralof and Lokir sit next to each other. They're preaching these ideologically different stances, like the devil and the angel on our shoulder. Ralof is dressed in blue, which is a color that we're going to associate with Nords for the rest of the game, and he's comically Nordic. He has this flowing hair, this pale skin. But Lokir is dressed in brown. He's signaling neutrality, and it puts him a step closer to alignment with the Empire. He's a bit dirty, you can tell he's just kind of scraping by, and you know he's a lowborn. You can tell he was rejected from the system even before the Empire came around. And physically, Ralof is closer to you, which is not a coincidence. The game really wants you to decide how you feel about Ralof before the cart ride is over. But then there's the driver. And him facing away makes sense because, I mean, he's driving the cart, but it also obscures his face, which further paints him in the position of just being a cog in a larger machine. Not a person, but a function of the Empire. And the gag that Ulfric is wearing tells so much. First, it's a sign of how afraid the Empire is of him. It feels like a very Hannibal Lecterian way to deal with a captive, but it's also foreshadowing this central theme in Skyrim, that your voice is more powerful than anything else. And of course, this is very literal in Skyrim. I sent Lydia absolutely packing down High Hrothgar more than a few times in my playthroughs, and I wouldn't hesitate to do it again if she looks at me funny, but it's also very metaphorical. Because sure, you can use swords to draw blood, but the most powerful and world-changing power in the world of Skyrim is your voice. And of course, in this high fantasy Skyrim environment, it means that your voice is basically just a really powerful sword, but the metaphor is quite beautiful. There's more going on in the scene than the cart and the people on it, though. This is our first introduction to the world of Skyrim, and Bethesda picked the location very carefully. Because in contrast to Oblivion, which starts in a cell, Skyrim begins with a focus on the environment and nature. Look around outside the cart. We're not in this beautiful, lush fantasy environment of Oblivion anymore. It's cold. The colors are muted. You can almost feel how harsh it is. And that snow in Skyrim is everywhere. It's part of the game's DNA. And if you're not walking through it literally, you can see it in the mountains, you can see it in the distance. And some of my earliest memories of playing Skyrim are from Christmas time. There was snow falling in the game, snow falling outside my window behind me in Vermont. It's just one of those memories that's tattooed on my brain. Snow is harsh, but it's also magical and mysterious. It leaves you wondering what's underneath. It paints this blank canvas across the land, and that draws your attention to whatever breaks through, which in Skyrim is usually a tree, a ruin, a footprint, maybe a corpse, but it makes every step exciting. But even before the snow, the first thing I always notice in the world of Skyrim are the trees. And it's not something you notice until you slow down and look, but Skyrim's conifer trees are kind of iconic. They're splattered all over the game, and they provide this splash of green no matter where you go. And it's because they're resilient trees. They can withstand the cold Skyrim environment no problem and hold on to their needles year-round, which is important in keeping the game from looking absolutely destitute at every turn. Which reminds me a lot of the native Nords. They're facing so much hardship, they're being battered by these outside forces, and yet they still hold on. They're old, they're deeply rooted, and they hold the land together. But some of the trees are dead or dying. And it's actually a perfect metaphor for what's happening in Skyrim. The world is sick. Some are standing strong, but there's this disease in Skyrim, and it might be the Empire, it might be the Rebellion, it might even be the Dragons, but no one can agree on what's killing Skyrim, only that something is. When it was being marketed before release, Skyrim got famous for being the if you see it, you can go there game. But they kept this close to their chest during the intro. And you'll get this big reveal later after you see the dragons, after you choose a side, after you learn how to swing a sword and sneak by a bear. Or, you can kill the bear. Let's be real, we always sneak attack the bear with a bow, right? And then you're like, wow, that feels really good. I promised I wasn't gonna be a stealth archer this time, but that felt really good. And then in a few hours I'm in Riften with full Nightingale armor and a bow more powerful than a bear at 50 cal, and damn it, I was supposed to be a battle mage. But the cart ride doesn't show off the expansive world at all. It's close, it's cold, it's claustrophobic. But by starting small, Skyrim tells you something important, that this massive open world is only as powerful as the smallest details. And it's this design philosophy that nothing is too small to matter that makes Skyrim feel so alive.
Because you can go anywhere in this world, and more importantly than that, anywhere you go, you're gonna be rewarded. And Skyrim's intro works to show you that before Ralof even opens his mouth, which is really incredible.
I used to wonder why Skyrim started so slowly, because Skyrim's the most fun when you're running around the world and going into dungeons and exploring, so why would you start chained to a cart? Well, Skyrim gives you freedom in this slow, methodical way. First, you're blind and the game is silent, and then they start to fill your ears with those ambient sounds and music. Then the game opens your eyes and you start to take in the world, and then they give you the ability to turn your head. But all these moving pieces are just parts of a thesis that Bethesda is building with the cart. Everything that's said, everything you hear, everything you see, it's all pointed towards the singular theme that you are powerless when you start Skyrim. But then as soon as the dragon attacks, your power starts to ramp up massively. Suddenly you're free to run, you can jump, you can look around, you can go where you want, and then you're posed with a choice. Do you follow Ralof, who was so quick to treat you like a brother, who gave up everything to fight for what he thought was right, what he thought was best for the future of Skyrim? Or do you follow Hadvar, who's coming to your aid simply because it's the right thing to do? Who's clearly just a cog in a larger machine, but when he's separated from that machine, seems like a friend, seems like someone you can trust. Skyrim gives you the ability to choose. You can go with Ralof and he'll escort you to town, he'll point you to his sister, he'll help you get on your feet. Or if you go with Hadvar, he'll help you go to town, he'll get you on your feet. But if you pick Ralof, Hadvar dies. And if you pick Hadvar, Ralof dies. Skyrim gives you the power to kill before you even pick up your first weapon. Skyrim is the best-selling RPG of all time, and this cart is the absolute best way to prepare you for playing an RPG. You see, role-playing games are all about player power and player choice, and what does the cart do? It robs you of all your power and robs you of all your choice. The cart makes you sit and watch as people make decisions for you. You're going to be carted off and killed. Ralof assumes that you're part of the Stormcloak Rebellion. The Empire doesn't even bother asking. In the cart, you can't move, you can't speak, you can only sit and look and listen. But the world starts to build around you. It's not with lore dumps or monologues or flashy cutscenes, but it's with silence. It's with ambient sounds. It's with pine trees. It's with arguments between men who are about to die. It doesn't open with an action. It opens with a question. What will you do when it's your turn to choose? So why does Skyrim start in a cart? Because before Skyrim gives you freedom, it needs you to understand what it feels like to have none. Because before you're Dragonborn, before you're anything, you're just a nameless prisoner. And Skyrim teaches you, in a short, janky cart ride, that meaning doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun one to make, and obviously Skyrim is a really, really important game to me. If you want more long-form content like this, there's going to be more soon, so subscribe, like, all of that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.